red oxide surfacer. I added a few cool white accents to give some chromatic punch and to establish a near pure white reference, something for the camo to push against. The faceplate got the classic RLM04 yellow over red primer, a nod to the older suit lineages in my collection, and a way to pull the eye toward a warm focal point in an otherwise cold finish. The hull base was sprayed in Tamiya LP lacquer paint Insignia White, which lays down beautifully. I'm seriously considering more of the LP range. They dry flatter the mister color and offer a nice contrast. I'm not saying flatter is better, but it's nicely different, something I might lean into more on future builds. I was careful not to flood it and just blast it on, using the Insignia White more as a shade and letting the zenithal and cool white mottling show through. This is the start of the sun-bleached UV faded look that defines the Ghost Knight. For camo patterns like this, I start with a favorite ritual. I sketch the camo outline with a soft B grade pencil. It's not just about coverage though, it's about the flow. I want the pattern to move the eye across the major curves and set up natural zones for highlights and weathering later. Most of the focus goes into the upper hull, but I echo those same shapes onto the lower legs, shoulder armor, and forearms, keeping their final pose in mind so that everything reads properly and cohesively once the model's complete. The next step is the experiment. I'm introducing a new tone to my work I'll call Eggplant. It's officially Russian aircraft blue, but really it's a deep purple grey, and I've mixed that over my legacy dark grey mixing bowl, and that produces a colour bridge to past projects, something that makes each camo run feel unique. Then using a frayed bird round brush with no point, I sketch loosely over the pencil lines. The splayed bristles give me this soft, almost bokeh-like edge, an organic blur to start the camo transition. Then I go in with the main dark camo color, a 50-50 mix of RLM black gray and that eggplant paint, and freehand airbrush it along the outline. I let the overspray feather into the lighter base on purpose. That's a feature, not a bug, and the start of what I call the overlap method. To build dimension, I tint that dark mix with a bit of the light base color and spray it into the upward facing surfaces to simulate that early UV bleaching. Not too much. I want to keep the contrast much like this in ring bound form. So when the crews, the engineers needed to work on was to overnight, I seal them in with more GX100, typically in multiple passes. This gives the film enough depth to fully blend into the surface. After the finish cures, again temperature dependent, I'll gently wet sand it back with the same sponges to make sure the film edges completely disappear. It's not essential, but I like to go the extra mile on large water slides, especially ones with Hasegawa. The transfers can be a bit thick, and blending them in gives that painted on look that I'm always really after, especially for the big unit markings across the shoulders, chest and upper head areas. Okay, before diving into the final weathering, I want to show you a small fail. This time I picked up a soft buff sponge from the skincare aisle while shopping with my wife. It looked promising in the package. You know, good texture, nice cell pattern, but once I opened it up, total failure. It shredded instantly, dropping fibers everywhere, and it would have been a nightmare on a scale model, so I tossed that aside. Instead, I went back to what works. A chunk of my old yellow bathroom sponge, the same one I've been using since my first Gold Coast studio about 7 years ago when we moved from Tokyo to Australia, and it's still going strong. For this chipping pass, I kept with the logic of differentiated priming, meaning I chipped back with the colors that echo the material underneath. For the red oxide base sections, I went with Cavalry Red. It's a little brighter and more chromatically rich than the primer, but I find that works better for surface chips. For the darker and lighter grey zones, I used Vallejo Sky Grey, a cool neutral tone that reads well as a worn primer or exposed undercoat. Then I pushed the contrast with a few edge chips in off-white and then pure black, just to pop some surfaces and reinforce key areas like vents and shoulder edges. Nothing groundbreaking here, but it's clean, clear, and visually readable, especially for builders new to weathering who want to try layered chipping by tone. I then kicked off the oil weathering process with a targeted pass using Mr. Weathering Color. Clean, efficient, and easy to control. I'm always experimenting with new products, and this time I used multi-black and multi-white. They're oil-based paints with fast-drying additives that make them ideal for precise weathering. I prefer the newer round bottles since they fit a paint stirrer. The older square ones don't. I started with multi-black and a fresh Tamiya HF brush for sharp application. My weathering logic here follows the... Since the Ghost Knight flies head first, I placed fine impact marks along the upper facing surfaces where debris would naturally strike. After that, I softened and shaped the marks using a dry, flat HF brush to suggest sloughed impact trails rather than clean dots that would look like a kind of raindrop effect. I also played with using the Abteilung matte effect thinner, which let me stretch the oil effects and tweak the shapes without wiping them out completely. Once I was happy with the black effects, I introduced multi-white. This time dropped into the same palette, allowing me to create a custom grey mix on the fly. This hybrid grey, which really looked like a lunar tone, added subtle variety between the harsher black marks and the cleaner white hits. I was especially careful with the white. On a dark hull like this, a little, goes a long way. Too much and suddenly it looks like you parked under that tree and got hit by the local bird population. Hey, I wanted to be the first one to say it. So I kept it tight, using just enough to imply micro impacts and, consequence wear, without losing the dignity of the dark grey paintwork. It's a solid start to the weathering finish. It's directional, nuanced, and designed to set up the final layer which comes next. Now for the final pass. It's one of those subtle finishing moves that adds maybe 1% to the model, but it brings everything together. I picked up this particular oil paint, warmish red mauve, I guess that word again, from my favorite art store in Shinjuku, Sekkaido, on the trip back to Japan in December 2023. I'd been meaning to push some mauve and purple tones into my work for a while, and if anything, just to improve and increase my vocabulary and English pronunciation. And this seems like the right project to try it out with. To ground the tone and keep it in world, I mixed it 50-50 with a known paint to me, Starship Filth. And then I thinned the whole blend down with Abteilung matte effect thinner that I had out from before. Now, that mauve paint is potent. The moment you add a little bit of thinner, it explodes back into life. It's borderline shocking. But once mixed with Starship Filth, it calms down and becomes a perfect Ghost Knight tone. I applied it very thin, more like a filter than a stain, softening the white ankle armor and especially that top plate near the exhaust point. It's a true kakushaji, a hidden flavor. Have you noticed I don't balk at saying weird Japanese words? They probably sound weird to you, but it's a lot easier when I'm saying mauve. Kakushaji is that secret chef's kiss type of flavor that you can add to dishes to make them really unique and special. You might not notice it directly, but if it were not added, you'd notice it was missing, and that's what I was going for here. And yes, is probably ironic. Fancy Italian oil Japanese art store. But that's the kind of flavor hunting I do for these builds. It might look like a bizarre experiment, but it's actually the result of, 20 plus years of color experience, studio taste, and overthinking in the art supply aisle. The outcome, it's a finish that's cold, cohesive, and it's subtly different from the usual, World War II Xerox approach. I'll call it what it is. It's a bit of a Link special this time, and I'm really pleased with how it turned out. And that's the Ghost Knight. From raw plastic to an iconic, cold, and calculated space warfare Mark 44 finish with a unique flavor twist. If you found this video useful, interesting, or just plain cool to watch, there are a few ways to support the studio. The digital edition is available right now. It includes the full photo gallery, step-by-step captions, tools, paints, and everything else I used to complete this build. And if you prefer print, the Workbench edition is coming soon, part of the same series as the Hammer Knight and Griffin, now available as a 3-pack bundle with flat rate shipping worldwide. And to my Patreon Brobot crew, thank you. Your support makes this whole thing possible. And if you're not on there yet and want early access to builds, behind the scenes content and special rewards, you can join anytime via the link below. Drop me a comment if you've got questions, or just let me know what stood out on this one for you. I always love hearing from people and what you take away from my builds. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already. It really helps this kind of work stay visible in the flood of algorithmic starship sludge. Until next time, take care, build smart, and keep it interesting. You don't have to do it how YouTube tells you to do it. You can actually change it a great deal. So part of that thinking was also in the Workbench series because it's one model, it's one work through, and I wanted to, I think things are easier to assimilate if it's a one thing. The other books that have 8 models in them, it's hard to pull them apart, Does anybody have Hund, for example? Peter, I wasn't saying anything bad about the Spanish. No. Does anybody have Hund, for example? Yeah. Did you feel, is that one, as you're reading through it, do they feel separate and different? Or do they feel a bit samey after you go through them? I'm sorry, and please, just be blunt. I don't mind at all.
I think what helps with those is the law at the start.
Thank you.
And it gives you a guidance as to why this particular version is this way, rather than just, here's the same kit 8 times with different colours on it, sort of thing.
Best customer ever. So I really did try to make them unique, but I also felt the real challenge of it because it's 8 models and they're slightly different, they've got different decals, but I really worked to make the paint very different, but I did feel restricted by page count, for example. To fit the 8 in, I could only fit so much in. So there's a lot of thinking that gets omitted. Now I don't know, I know we all like different flavors of chocolate, don't we? So not everybody is I don't even know the right words for this. Sorry, I'm kind of, this is actually quite new for me to try to externalize. I understand that different folks, we do modeling in a different way, and we do it for different reasons. We enjoy different aspects of it. Some of us are more, we think about it more, we have a different cognitive input to our modeling, and some people don't want that because they've got too much of that at work. They just want, I just want to make the Space Marine. I really understand that one too, and I understand not all of my work should be at that thinking up here about it too much. Sometimes I should just belt it out. Is anyone familiar with my Kit Club finish, for example? The pink one, it's like the Pink Panther from World War II. I put that one on the robot. That one is more of a visceral unleashing of a relatively simple paint scheme, so it's not overly thought through. Whereas there's some other ones in that Hund book that were way overthought, like the masking board, one that's got the multiple colours, making them work. So, the Workbench edition, it was designed in part to help my other friends who are also thinker modelers, because they want to know the whys of why you've done something rather than just the how. Do any of you feel that? You want to know why along with the how?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
I think that helps.
Yeah.
Because if you know why, then you're not just following what you do. You can sort of take what you're doing and then push it your own way.
It's the whole teaching to fish thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That was. Yeah, that was the whole thinking. See you guys.
So if you have a consistent intent through the whole process, I feel like you get a more focused outcome.
Who's speaking?
Sorry, that was me.
Sorry. I was looking past you. I'm like, where? God. So my conscience talking. So please go ahead.
Yeah, it just feels like if you have a focused intent throughout, instead of it being like, okay, here's the engine exhaust, I'm going to get my engine exhaust painting techniques and do that.
Right.
Here's armor panel technique, here's cabling technique.
Right.
But if you're like, no, the effect that I want to create for this model is X, Y, Z, then the whole thing comes together in like a focused intent as opposed to a bunch of recipes bolted together.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly that. May I use your name?
Gary.
No, I know you, Gary,
Oh.
but no, can I use? I don't want to. I don't want to.
Sorry.
It's Gary.
Okay.
No, I don't know what the rules are for that. But as Gary was mentioning, that's very much why the law kicks off each one, and then I'm trying to establish what is a narrative process for each one. No, not everybody wants that. Some people don't care, and they're not real. Let's always be really honest. But that narrative approach, and it does shape the steps and the reasons for choosing them, and that does greatly affect your outcome. So I wanted to get all of that in. And my experiment with putting that out there is this series, and thank you. Many of you have come and bought them today. I'm interested because they're still pretty new. I've done 3 of them now to kind of give a bit of range to it. But the feedback so far has been really good. I'm still curious though, because that's something again, like you're saying, in person we can get that feedback, but on the internet, and you just don't know what's coming back. I only get feedback on my reels, and they're usually not. It's not very positive. People want the whole Mona Lisa in 20 seconds, so that's quite tough. I can check my notes for the things I was supposed to, and the smarter, prepared version of me was going to say to you, or would I be more available to you as answering questions that you were shouting out? Which one do you want? If anything. How much more time am I going to have? I make models in the room. They don't prepare me for public speaking.
So like looking on your works, like on YouTube, I watch on YouTube.
Thank you.
I find that your colour selection is really good. Like, I'd like to know
It
your
is.
inspiration.
You are correct. sorry.
No worries.
I'm glad as the live stream. My wife would
See
kick
you
me.
plant. See you plant.
Yeah, plant.
Pay me later. But yeah, I like your colour selections. You know, like on the fork, I think it is. You know, the blues. I like how you. And I also I'd like to know like your patterns. Do you draw from nature on patterns, or do you?
Oh, okay. That's it is a really good question. And yeah, number one, I am a bit odd. Let's just call it what it is. So there's that one. I spend far too much time thinking about paint schemes, and and who else? I saw a bunch of you go, oh, because you feel the pain too, don't you? Are you doing it as well? So okay. So no, that's fair enough. And because inspiration strikes, but the human brain works such that we program it and ask it what we want, and it works
all the time, doesn't it? And you never know when they're going to strike. So I try to include more of that, and if people want more of that, because I do get that color questions, color theory things coming back, I might try to keep more of that in. So just for example, the one I just mentioned, the Kit Club, it's called, it's based between the SAS Desert Pink Panther, this SAS Jeeps of World War II, but I got the inspiration from waiting at the side of the road, the footpath, and there was a no standing sign. Somebody from Sydney, I don't know if the road signs are the same colours everywhere in Australia. I think we're pretty homogeneous, but so it's a no standing sign that's beat up with the sun damage. There's a yellow sign next to it, and there's a green I think it's a wattle that was behind it. And just looking at it, I went, that's it. And because I needed one too, because I'm creative on demand for work purposes, you also need them quick sometimes. So that was an example of that. But then, for example, this one's an ultra nerdy thinking one. So it's who's a aircraft buff? So you know the high visibility scheme, it's called, of the U.S. Navy. From, I think it was is it in Top Gun, John? Is that high visibility for the early Top Gun movie? Maybe, but it's white, grey, and a couple of colours. So one of the colours they use in it is called insignia white. So I wanted a very pale but different spacey colour. Then I went with Russian, because I wanted the mix to show that humanity eventually gets along. I mean, he invited him to Alaska. Maybe they started trading paint. There's a color called, it's got nicknames. They call it something else. We call it Russian eggplant color for a bunch of the aircraft here. So I put those two together to be, how I'd like the future of humanity to go. And that series is part of Robot Battle 5, where they're fighting AI, which has become more and more kind of meaningful to us today, hasn't it? With all coming up. So I really wanted it's a theme within a theme within a theme. I often find that so themes within themes. One of the things that I would suggest doing is by putting arbitrary constraints on you. As an amateur modeler, you don't have any constraints, do you? No, which is terrible, because you can do anything. It's horrible, isn't it? Yeah. And it means your choices are. Anybody seen Steve Martin, The Jerk? I love that movie. You've won anything from here to here. You can win. You can choose from here to here. This and this. Oh, you won this. And often we need that. We need constraints to help our laser beam brains to be able to focus and make choices between things that are not too far apart. Because technically speaking, we could probably make a number of them work. And so that's one. That's example of two different ones. One was nature standing waiting for the lights to change, and the other one was aircraft schemes put into the future, and two nations' paints yoinked across. It's quite convoluted, that one. That one's difficult to explain. Yeah, I know, right? That one doesn't help, does it? The stop sign, the no standing. That one's much more relatable. The other one's a bit, that's why you said you're a nut job. So if I just finish it off, please, Christian. I try to share those ones, but keeping them within constraints. And when you get access to somebody like me who's quite good with that sort of stuff, one of the ways I learned to become good with color was by copying people who were good with color. I don't think I have any natural ability to it. I didn't go to art school, I didn't do any of those things. but I really liked a couple of people's work, and I copied them obsessively so that I could produce, forgeries of their work. And that led to a job and my current downfall. Yeah. But yeah, that works because I think, again, that's something that's not talked about in scale modeling, that we as mimicry machines, we learn through the doing and copying of others. And so that's a really good way to do it, is copy my paint schemes so that you learn on the inside what they're meaning and how they're working together. And after multiple versions of that, it might take a couple of times, but you'll get better and better at it. And I feel that's one of the ways that I became, demonstrably good at choosing colors. I mean, look at the bones. But, yeah. Christian, sorry, go ahead, man.
You're talking about sort of constraints as well as your words, forgery and mimicry.
Yeah.
Where within that sort of framework do we expand modelling, and where does it go, and where do you think it's going?
Okay, but that is very self-dependent, isn't it? Because you'll be doing we'll call them forgeries, just for laughs, it sounds cool. But there will come a time when your forgeries no longer look like forgeries because you get so good at it. That's another thing. And it's one of those things. Anybody who does anything in an artistic capacity will likely agree with me. I know artists argue about everything, but you don't try to develop a style. You do your thing, and the style does you. It's more like how it works. So I was trying to explain it to the gentleman I was driving up with, Brett, and he said, how is it that you can produce what seem like different styles? So you've got the hand paint, the airbrush paint, they look a bit different but connected. I said, well, they're all the same thing but also not. And it's only through the trying to get that finish and doing it that you actually get to learn and develop a skill. But sorry, that didn't probably make sense. I haven't got a good way of explaining that one yet. Try more. And then try some more. But yeah, it comes as an outcome of the rapidity of the iterations, and that probably came out better. Sorry, I'm not a practiced public speaker, so you know. Are we at time? Or just?
I don't know when it's supposed to finish.
Okay.
I just have a question, like, what you
Sure.
describing
I'm sorry if it doesn't completely make sense. I'm kind of riffing a bit. Exactly.
You're essentially describing a quite a narrative-driven approach to
Yes.
how you design your models.
100%.
And I'm just wondering, what are you've already described that, I guess, paint schemes are a tool for doing that. What other tools, when you're doing the model, would you think you can use to heavily influence that narrative?
Oh,
So again,
that's
like,
a great question.
weathering is a good example. Like, obviously,
Yes.
you've got something new,
Yes.
straight out of the box. It hasn't seen battle. Got something heavily weathered. It's seen a battle. But what are the kind of those other things that you can use?
Fantastic. Well, I actually write my story first.
Okay.
So I don't make all the mistakes and then cover it up with law. It's actually the other way around. I decide everything first, and then at each step, I'm then keeping that in mind. So when I'm doing my build, I've got my law decided.
Yeah.
And then I go through it and I think, okay, so how new something is, how old something is, where it's operating, what environment, why. I think about the why. Do you guys see Spaceballs? Yeah, they are. They're in my room. So that I do it in I try to do it in the build section, and I keep it in mind with the paint section, and then really cap it off with the weathering section. We do get to do a lot more storytelling with the weathering section, don't we? Because, pardon me, that was embarrassing. Weathering is where you really get to age and tell a lot more story. Paint is more lore and what it is, but weathering is what it's been doing. how and where it's been weathered as well. But that's an excellent question. Did I answer that reasonably? Okay, so it's law first for me, and then the whole build is through that narrative approach, and I try to keep it in mind. But it doesn't need to be all empowering either, because there's a lot of time for me to wrap. Is it?
Trying to get rid of us.
No, it feels like 45. Is it?
It's 3 o'clock.
Yeah. Boom. No, that was not a talk that deserved. I just feel. I'm sorry if I was kind of unpro. I just feel like I came along and talked to a bunch of mates, but I hope that was cool. I'd like to be able to do more hands-on, but I'd need a bit of a longer run-up sort of thing. Or once I can get, my daughter just finished HSC yesterday, so we're talking about coming up with the family next year. So if I had the boss handling the money and the side, I could be, performing monkey on the side all day at my booth. That would work pretty well, right? Yeah, okay. Thank you very much for coming.